Hello, and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. In this one, we have several Russian advances across the front line in the Siversk, Chesev Yar, Pokrovsk, Krokhove, and Zaporizhia directions. Starting out in the south, the Russians have advanced north of the settlement of Nasirenka, where they are expanding their zone of control along the forest lines, capturing some Ukrainian fortified positions in the area, as well as some forest lines and fields. This leads to offensive operations in the direction of Orhiv, where the Russians would be looking to launch offensive operations towards Novoandelivka, Novodanilivka, Melatukmeshka, and the general village chain here in the western direction, and then follow it up with an assault on Orhiv if they plan on offensive operations in the Zaporizhia section of the front line. The Zaporizhia section is the area in which there are the most Russian and Ukrainian soldiers concentrated next to the Donetsk region. Starting out in the Donetsk region, we see the Russians have advanced in the direction of Maximivka, north of the settlements, where the Russians are securing the general area around the settlement in preparation for offensive operations towards Suchy Yarli. We do not see any roads in this direction other than the one directly north of Maximivka, directly connected to Suchy Yar through the forest lines. With the forest lines as cover, the Russians could use this as an opportunity to launch offensive operations towards Suchy Yarli, but it will be a slow process because it's a large open field they have to cover, and Kursk is within the near vicinity. At the very least, the Ukrainians would be able to send several FPV operators and artillery units to the northern parts to cover the defense of Suchy Yarli, as it will allow the Russians, if they capture it, to use that as a springboard for several offensive operations along the river line, cutting off supplies for Ukrainian forces and launching some DRG units closer towards the road, supplying Kursk, and it is another way to fight in the direction of Rusliv. The other part is launching offensive operations along the fortified positions towards Orosliv, where the Russians would launch offensive operations towards the settlement. Combining both of these would allow the Russians to do a pincer maneuver towards Konstantinopel along the river line in the east and towards the fortified positions in the west. This would be to physically cut off the road west of Kursk. Alternatively, they can hold their current positions, slowly inch forward, and use FPV drones and artillery to bombard any Ukrainian movement in the area. In the east of Kursk, the Russians continue storming the fortified positions of the Ukrainians, where they're now launching attacks along the main forest line, which is a double forest line, towards Kursk, moving directly from the east, where the Russians hold their positions, all the way through the west. This is to flank the Ukrainian positions and to hit them directly along the main highway, which is located at the high grounds overlooking the general area. The Russians are making use of the high grounds to storm the fortified positions of the Ukrainians head-on. The fighting in this section of the front line is mostly through the drop-off of infantry in the forest lines, combined with heavy artillery, FPV drones, and FAB bombs on Ukrainian positions near the fortified positions and the general area in Kursk. There has also been US strikes on the fortified positions. Further north, the Russians have captured the remaining parts of Novodimitrivka and are continuing the battle down along the road towards Suntsivka. There are mixed reports. Some suggest Russians have already gained a foothold within the next settlement. Others say that the fighting is simply taking place in the forest lines near Novodimitrivka. It is confirmed the Russians have captured Novodimitrivka and will also likely fight in the direction of Soria, south of the fortified positions. There's no fortified positions between Novodimitrivka and Suntsivka. This makes it difficult for the Ukrainians to stop or slow down Russian offensive operations in that direction. To the north of Novoalexandrivka, the Russians have captured some forest lines and secured some supply roads in the northern direction. This allowed for a stronger push in the direction of Vostyshenka, as the Russians now have a stronger flank in the northern direction. It will also allow the Russians to push in the direction of Berenivka, to have another flank to attack the Ukrainian positions along the main highway between Pokrovsk and Konstantinivka. Moving on to the Chesev Yar direction, the Russians are fighting over the hill overlooking the canal area here west of Klishivka, southeast of Stupushki. This is to strengthen the Russian positions here in the southern flank of Chesev Yar, launch offensive operations towards Stupushki, and down along the canal to secure the entirety of it, all of the crossings in the area, and flank Toretsk from the northern direction or push in the direction of Bretichina, and simply flank Chesev Yar in its entirety from the south. They'll also likely launch offensive operations in the northern direction following the offensive operations in the south. Further north in the direction of the north of Ivano-Derivka, the Russians continued offensive operations in this direction along the forest lines to cut off the road between Kupyansk and fortified positions near Ivano-Derivka, limiting the supplies between the two settlements, cutting off the connection, and allowing the Russians to launch offensive operations towards the fortified positions in this direction. We see these are the advancements the Russians have made in the southern and eastern section of the front line. At the same time, there's reports of a third Russian offensive here in the direction of Kursk, where they're looking to yet again recapture some more territory. According to Deep State Map, the Russians are launching offensive operations in the flanks of the pocket that the Russians have created here in the northwestern outskirts of the Kursk operation of the Ukrainians. At the same time, they're also pushing in the direction of Darino, where it is reported that they have gained a foothold within the settlement across the river line. The objective of the Russians is to gain control over the border area in the southern flank, gain a foothold across the river line, and expand a bridgehead to flank the Ukrainian positions and fight in the direction of Svetlikovo. In the northern direction is to close this pocket, push in the direction of Malaya Luknia, and then down towards Sutsha. This will be a combined strike to gain control over further positions here in the western direction. Following the success of the previous two Kursk counteroffensives, the Russians are here looking to encircle even more Ukrainian units. Following the second 2.0 Russian offensive here in the Kursk direction, counteroffensive to recapture territory, the Ukrainians sent the 17th Tank Brigade and the 47th Mechanized Brigade to hold their positions and counterattack in the direction of Novoivanovka and Darino, as well as in the northern direction near Malaya Luknia. All of these have failed. The Russians will manage to hold on to these positions and have built up enough forces to launch Offensive Operation 3.0. The question here will be, will the Ukrainians finally give up their Kursk incursion, or will they send additional reinforcements to stabilize the front yet again? And this will further weaken the Ukrainian positions in the east and south. According to Vladimir Putin himself in a speech he made yesterday following the re-election of former President Donald Trump, Putin claimed that 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers are located here to the east of Kupyansk and that they have been encircled due to the Russians capturing Kozlenikivka and Krychlyakivka in the south. This cut off the connection and main bridge through Sinkove. There is still the bridge near Kupyansk, but it is within close vicinity of the Russian forces and it is constantly bombarded. This means that the only resupply the Ukrainians are capable of sending across the Uskar River line are through pontoon bridges, which is also constantly targeted by Russian artillery and the Russian Air Force. This means that although they are not encircled, they have a limited supplies, and if it's such a large grouping as 15,000, there's no way to confirm this information, then the Ukrainians would be in a very difficult position because pontoon bridges will not be enough to supply those. We did see something similar where the Ukrainians hit the bridges along the same river. The reason why the Ukrainians did not succeed was because the HIMARS then became targets for the Russian Air Force, which managed to destroy a couple of them. This forced the Ukrainians to withdraw those HIMARS and they could not continue their bombardment of the pontoon bridges, which is why we stopped seeing videos of that, which means that the Russians ended up being able to supply their forces, and in that direction it was only 3,000 soldiers reportedly. This is 5 times as many soldiers, and the Russian Air Force is not going to be losing jets shooting down the pontoon bridges, and therefore the Russians have a significant advantage over the Ukrainians in this similar situation, and this means that the Ukrainians would be in a very difficult situation and would be forced to withdraw their forces across the Uskar River line, similarly to how the Russians were forced to withdraw across the Dnieper River in the Kherson direction because they had too many troops to properly supply with pontoon bridges. This is only one possibility. The other is that they continue holding on to their positions and the Russians would have to storm them head on, which they are currently doing by attacking their flanks along the Uskar River line towards Shlushkivka in the south and Petropavlivka in the north. The objective here is to gain control of the positions along the river line and ignore the fortified positions in the east to avoid having to fight over every single one of those. So we're seeing the main fighting taking place in the northern and southern flank, where the Russian objective is to completely cut off these 15,000 soldiers and prevent a withdrawal of them across the river line, and this is why a lot of the efforts is focused in this direction. And that is all for this update. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon and YouTube membership for additional content. Thank you everyone who supported me. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.